What's up, everybody? Professor Pools here. Today I want to talk a little bit about Paradox Rift. If you know anything about the set, it came out in November 2023 last year, and it had the Roaring Moon and the Iron Valley as the top chases. Now we've been seeing a lot of changes with the prices in that set. Some of the illustration rares are actually starting to pop up in price. One of them even matching the price of the Roaring Moon. We're also seeing some SIRs that probably weren't appreciated as much starting to jump up in price, and some playable cards in the set also going down in price. So I want to go over a little bit of those things, especially because back when the set came out in November, there was a lot of hype, but those Paradox Pokemon really just haven't been as popular lately as some of the Sword and Shield era sets, so the prices dropped. I think now that we're getting a little bit deeper into the Scarlet and Violet era, people are starting to have a little bit more respect for some of these earlier Scarlet and Violet sets like Scarlet and Violet Base, Paldea Evolve, Paradox Rift, and we're starting to see some of the illustration rare and special illustration rares jump up in price pretty significantly. So today I want to go over Paradox Rift specifically, so let's go ahead and jump on over to TCG Player and look at some of the individual cards in the set. Alright everybody, now that we're on TCG Player, let's go ahead and start looking at some of the individual cards, starting with the Roaring Moon. So 6 months ago, the Roaring Moon was selling for $91. It has since then taken a big drop. The current low was $52, and its current price right now is $60. I actually have this card. I actually pulled it back in December when me and some of my friends opened hundreds of packs, Paradox 151, Crown Zenith, but I actually traded it to a friend to help finish their master set while I was completing 151. But I actually recently bought it back for a pretty good price, which I'm happy with looking at the current value of the card. So what's going on here? I think now that the people are finally starting to respect the Paradox Pokemon a little bit, the price is starting to trickle back up. Paradox is more than 6 months behind us, so I think this card has a lot of room to grow. I think as people start to appreciate the Scarlet and Violet era and the ancient future Pokemon, I think this card has a lot of potential. But recently it's been having a battle for the top card from Paradox with an illustration rare of an OG Pokemon, and that is the Groudon illustration rare. The Groudon currently is selling for $56, which is crazy considering in the past 6 months its low was $23.79. Actually, I bought it at $22.42. So in the past 6 months you could buy it for $22.42, and it peaked at $64, and it is now sitting at $56 for an illustration rare. Recently, we've been seeing this a lot lately, especially with Paldea Evolved, with a few of the illustration rares. I think now that people are looking back at some of these sets, they're starting to really appreciate some of the cards, especially the illustration rares with OG Pokemon. Also, it helps that sets like Paradox and Paldea have well over 30 illustration rares each, whereas Twilight and Temporal are sitting in the low 20s. So these cards are a lot harder to pull than in the new sets. The Eevee and the Ghastly are really nice illustration rares from Temporal and Twilight, but they're relatively easy to pull compared to these because you're looking at 22 cards, 22 illustration rares in a set versus 32 or 36 for Paldea Evolved. So these cards are hundreds of packs harder to hit on average than the ones from Twilight and Temporal. Does that mean their prices will probably be worth more? You would think so, considering there's going to be less of them around, especially with quality control issues from sets such as Paradox and Paldea, but time will see. I mean, this card right now, the Groudon in a PSA 10 is selling on eBay for well over $200. I think it's sitting at around $250. I'll throw up a picture from eBay right here. But nonetheless, it is a $56 card right now. If a reprint ever happens of Paradox, we might see some of these prices go down, and you can see right now that it's actually going down a little bit. But I think people are finally starting to respect the card, and so I don't think we're ever going to see it come back down to $22. I think the 64 was a little crazy. It actually was more expensive than the Roaring Moon SIR for a little while, but just give it a little time. It might come down a little bit, but I think this card is going to stay pretty valuable going forward now that the respect for Scarlet and Violet era is finally starting to come, and people are starting to come around to some of the sets. Another card that's been jumping up recently is the Steelix. So again, another OG Pokemon. 6 months ago you could buy it for $10, and it recently jumped up to $26, and it's still sitting at just under $25 for the card. This was always a pretty popular card from Paradox, but for whatever reason the illustration rares in the set just really weren't that expensive. So $10, you've doubled your money if you had that card. I love this card. I think it's really cool, the construction side. I remember having a hard time pulling it. I actually ended up buying it from a friend who did pull it because I just could not get it. But I think this is a really cool card, and I don't expect the price to go down again anytime soon. I think people are starting to look back at some of these sets and realize, man, some of the illustration rares from some of these sets are pretty awesome and feature Pokemon that I love. I mean, I don't know why people weren't paying attention to these cards more now. But I'm glad people are, finally. And looking on to the next card, so the Altaria. This is a card that I've been hyping up forever, and I'm glad that people are finally starting to see it. This card is beautiful, and there's so much detail in the background. I really love this card. As far as OG Pokemon are concerned too. This card in the past 6 months, you could buy it for just under $20, $19.40. It spiked up to $44.86, and now it's sitting at $37.54. Currently, this card is actually worth more than the Iron Valiant SIR, which back in November when the set released, the Iron Valiant was the second top hit right behind the Roaring Moon. It was like a $70, $80 card. Now we're looking, I think it's a little bit less than this $37 mark that the Altaria is. I think this card has a lot of room to grow. If this card hit a low again, I would probably buy a few copies and hold on to it, because I think this card has a lot of potential looking back, especially from people like me who grew up on some of these Pokemon. I think people will really start to respect it going on. I'm glad people are now. Moving on to the next card, we have the Iron Valiant. I think this card is really cool. My friend Pokecrush, shout out to Pokecrush, he loves Tyranitar, so I know he likes the Iron Thorns in the background. But this card 6 months ago was $54, now sitting at $27.58. Or sorry, the 6 month low was $27.58, and it's now sitting at $34.71, which again is lower than the price of the Altaria right now. So what's happening? I think people are finally starting to appreciate some of these cards. There was a lot of hype going into it, and then people just kind of lost hope for the Paradox Pokemon, and also just with any other set, the prices get super inflated right at the start of release, and then they drop. But I think people are starting to realize that these are pretty cool cards, so they're starting to jump up. I personally love the Iron Valiant and the Roaring Moon. I want to pair them in my binder with the Ancient and Futures from Temporal Forces. I like the Ancient and Future idea. I think they'll look cool in a binder when you put them all together. I think this card has a lot of room to grow as well. I think this card will probably continue to rise in the future as Paradox kind of pulls away. It peaked at, like, looking at a year ago, it was a $70 card. Now it's down to $34, and it's slowly starting to trickle its way back up. I could see this card being a $40 or $50 card in the next 6 to 12 months. So moving on to Iron Valiant, this was a card that was heavily inflated in price due to its playability. In the past 6 months, we saw a low of $21.05, and it peaked at $37.79, and now it's just on its way down to $26. I suspect this is probably due to Twilight Masquerade really changing the meta. People must not be playing Iron Hands as much. I don't personally play the TCG a whole lot, so I'm not as intuitive into that, but I suspect that because of the meta change, the cards be just becoming less useful in the meta, so we're starting to see the prices finally drop on that card. If you like the artwork on this card, you probably should just give it another month or two. It'll probably be a good pickup, especially if you're trying to finish a master set of Paradox. There was a lot of hype right here, which made it, kind of pricey, but soon you'll probably be able to pick it up for a good price. Moving on to the Goldango, this is a card that I still don't understand why it's so cheap. I think this card is amazing, especially if you pair it with the Gimme Ghoul illustration rare. I think this card has a lot of potential in the future. I love the cards that connect Pokemon into one full picture. The Growlithe and the Perrin from Twilight is a cool example, though it's a Pokemon and a trainer. But I like the kind of cards that tell a story and connect the cards together and create one big piece of artwork. This card in the past 6 months was a $35 card at its peak. Its low was $18.28, and it's currently sitting at $22.16. So, over the past year, it has been slowly trickling down. But right now, it's a $22 SIR. So, if you really like the Goldango, now is probably a good time to pick it up. If you want to wait and see if it goes down a little bit, you can. But I have a feeling it's probably going to drop not within more than $5, like at this TCG low of $18. So I like this card. If I didn't already have it, I would probably pick it up right now. Moving on to the next card, another OG Pokemon I think that people are excited about, Garchomp. I think this card is not visually appealing. If you've seen this card in person, it really is not the most exciting card, but it is Garchomp. People love Garchomp, and so it's started to finally have its rise in price until recently. So looking at the past 6 months, it was a $28 card. Its 6 month low, $16, and then it peaked again to 27, pretty close to where its peak was in the last 6 months, and now it's back down to 2188. So I think because it's not a very visually appealing card, it might not hold its value as much as some of the other cards like the Altaria, the Steelix, the Groudon, but I do think that because it is a pretty OG Pokemon, that it'll probably hold its price well in the long term. This wave of increase in price is probably due to the fact that all the other cards that were popular, OG, Steelix, Altaria, Groudon, also jumped up, so people are probably just buying a bunch of cards that they liked. This card's probably going to drop right back down to the $16, $18 mark. But if you like this card, or if you're looking to finish in a master set, just give it a couple weeks and you can probably pick it up pretty easily. Another card, the Parasol Lady. So this card was $27 in the past 6 months. Dropped down to around $15.50 in the past 6 months, and now it's currently sitting at $19. I really don't expect this card to go crazy. I know in Japan this card was really expensive if you pull the Japanese version. Now it's a $19 card, so not a bad pickup. I don't see this card going crazy, long term. I mean, trainers have done that in the past from Sun and Moon and Sword Shield. So if you're a trainer collector, I mean, $19 is not a bad gig for an SIR, especially when it's as cool as this one with the rainbow. There's actually some hollow foil in the Parasol Lady's eyes that looks really cool if you get the light to hit it just right. It's a pretty cool card. So for 19 bucks, can't really go wrong. And then the last main card I want to look at here is the Tapu Koko. The Tapu Koko in the past 6 months was 20 bucks. It hit a low of $10.75, which is crazy for an SIR. But it's not the first time we've seen cards get this low. In Obsidian Flames, we have 2 SIRs that have lowered around $2 to $3 each. So this isn't the lowest we've seen. But $10.75 was the low, and it's currently sitting at $18. Again, these cards that are low end like this tend to, the wiggle room is pretty minimal. So if you like this card, I'd just say go ahead and pick it up. But you could always wait and see if it drops down $4 or $5. But if you can find somebody who will sell you a Paradox Rift a lot, and you can just get it at 75-80%, that's always a good deal too. I myself was able to do that, get a bunch of Paradox Rift cards at 80% that I didn't already have, and that really helped. So especially if you're coming in from an investing standpoint and with the prices starting to jump up, if you can get them at 80% and just hold them, I think that you're going to win big in the long term with a set like this. And then I had a couple honorable mentions. These are some of the illustration rares that I personally really like that I just wanted to touch on. One being the Magby. I really like the lava theme here, and not to sneak up ahead, but I think it goes well with the Snorunt with the snow theme. This card has been slowly starting to rise up in price. It had a TCG low of $5.65, and now it's up to $8.27. I think this card is going to continue to rise. I think people are going to appreciate this card more as it goes on. And then looking at the Snorunt, in the past 6 months, it was a $2.70 card. Now it's up to $5.20. I love the artwork on this. Narumi Sato is actually one of my favorite artists out of Pokemon. I have a whole page dedicated to artwork from this artist. The Eevee from Twilight Masquerade is also made by Narumi Sato. There's a lot of the Glaceon V alt art from Evolving Skies as well. I think this is a cool card and will continue to rise over the long term, in my opinion. And the Mantike. I think the Mantike card is slept on. This card is amazing, and for $5, I mean, this is such a cool card. I think some of the water type cards just don't get the love that they deserve. Looking at Twilight Masquerade, the Fion, such a beautiful card, but you can get it for under $5. I love this card. In the past 6 months, you could get it for just under $4, and now it's slowly starting to trickle its way back up. But again, pretty minimal. It's still only a $5 card. Looking at a year ago, it was a $9 card right at release, and it has tanked, and it's just slowly trickling its way back up. So if you like this card, it's probably a good time to go ahead and pick it up. And going over to the Vanillish, this card 6 months ago was a $5 card, and even now is only a $6.76 card. So this card, some of these lower end illustration rares are going to see minimal gains, but it has been going up over the long term. So if this is a card that you're looking for to complete your master set, I'd say go ahead and pick it up. I love the artwork on this card. I think it's a really cool with the chibi look. So if you're interested in this card, I'd say go ahead and pick it up. Alright everybody, that's going to be it for me today. Let me know what you think about Paradox Rift. Do you think the ancient future Pokemon are going to have some value long term, or do you just think the OG Pokemon like the Groudon and the Steelix are going to hold their value? In future videos, I'm going to talk about Paldea Evolved, and we're going to talk about the Magikarp, the Raichu, the Tyranitar, all kinds of exciting cards that are starting to jump up in price, so stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Put down a comment what your favorite card is from this set. Thanks everybody.